when somebody, a litigant in the court, doesn't have professional representation, solicitor or barrister. So Mackenzie Friends are lay legal advisors who sometimes help out when there's nobody else to help somebody in the court, because the court situation is quite intimidating and confusing for people, so we can help, so we're a bit more familiar. So that's what I do. I'm actually retired. I've been doing this child protection work or family justice work for about 5 or 6 years. It started because I was involved with a big case in Scotland where a young Down syndrome woman claimed that she had been abused all her childhood by her father and members of a paedophile ring of some sort. And in Hampstead, Aberdeen, it's quite a famous case. It's a Holly Greig case. She's never got justice for her abuse, her childhood abuse. That case was never investigated by the police, although there's quite a lot of evidence that could have been brought to light. And what happened in that case was that the main public campaigner about the case, my colleague Robert Green, was actually the subject of court proceedings himself for speaking publicly and being too vocal about the case. And he suffered 2 imprisonments, one in 2012 and one in last year in 2014. And yesterday, ironically, he was on trial for the 3rd time because again the same charges were being brought against him, that he had broken his injunction not to speak or whatever the charge was. Never quite got to the bottom of what the charge was this time. And he was up for trial yesterday. So I'm very happy today because he was judged on this occasion, did not lock him up, and he's been released free. He's not even on bail this time. Right. So it's a bit of a turning point up there, and I hope it's sort of indicative of a turning point generally. Anyway, that's how I got into this child abuse and child protection issue. Prior to that, I've been campaigning on various other issues, such as an anti-war campaign, and also about the real nature of terrorist events and what goes on in terrorist events, which I think the public are waking up to as well. They're not all what they officially cracked up to be. And also questioning about this New World Order agenda that's unrolling rather fast now. So I go back a long way as a campaigner. Anyway, this latest one seems to me, I only mention all the other campaigns because this is where I've come to rest in my deep old age, because this to me is the most important campaign of all, which is child protection. And it's child protection at the level where the abuse of children is deepest and darkest. So we're talking about not just paedophile rings and paedophile abuse, which is bad enough, thank you, but we're talking about ritual abuse as well, particularly in the case that's going through the family court right now. Because it's in the family court, I can't actually speak too much about the detail of it, although there is a lot about it already on the internet, so whatever I say, it's replicated a million times on a million websites by now, blogs and forums. It's a very big subject of huge public attention. So, but it is a serious case of possible ritual abuse, and it involves 2 children who grew up in England and they've got Russian family involved, grandparents, and that they reported last summer to their mum, it only came out last summer, that they had been abused not just by their father ever since they were very small, but by a group of people practicing these ritual ceremonies or horrible ritual stuff involving, so they say, the children said, involving murder and cannibalism of babies. So it's all going on in a school in North London. It wasn't going on at home, it's going on in their school and in the local church attached to the school. So quite a shock, horror. I don't know if you're not aware of this case. No. Okay. So that's what I'm going to say about that case. But obviously when something like that comes to light, rather like 2 or 3 years ago we had the Jimmy Savile revelations, and that was a very shocking moment for the public. This is going to be another big shock to the public. It already is a shock because although supposedly when things are in the family court you're not supposed to speak about them publicly or put stuff about them out, because that's a contempt of court. There's a sort of quite well-known rule that children's proceedings regarding children have to be confidential. That goes back to the Children's Act 1989. So it looks as though that act has been breached. Who breached it, how it got breached, we don't know, because the internet is a funny place. You know, you only have to just leak something from somebody late at night, a glass of wine, and they just send an email and attach a forbidden photograph or forbidden video footage, and then it's all over the place immediately, isn't it? So that's what's happened here. So the question is whether these sorts of cases where there's really quite terrible allegations of ritual abuse should be in the family court at all. So broadening the whole thing out, I don't think the family court is the place for a case of this gravity to be examined. And I don't think the family judge, in the space of about 11 days, which is what she's got, is to come to that conclusion, and possibly look at all the evidence and question all the people who are alleged to be involved in this. That's the job for the police. So why didn't the police do their job when the first reports were made last summer, last September? Well, they say they did. They did investigate, but they closed it down within 2 weeks, this investigation. And what they should have done, what the police always should do if there's allegations of sexual abuse against a child, is immediately go round to the person against whom the allegations are strongest and remove their computer and check what's going on their computer. That's normal practice. So why didn't they do this in this case? And it's got a very strong parallel with the Holly Gregg case that I was talking about in Scotland, because in that case, again, there was no seizing of the chief suspect's computer in that case. So the whole thing, was swept under the carpet. And we believe we know why in the Holly Gregg case. There was no investigation because one of the alleged abusers in this paedophile ring, whoever it was, whatever they got up to, was a senior forensic officer with the local police. So I think that must have had something to do with the non-investigation. And another of the alleged abusers is a local sheriff, which is a judge in Scotland. So that's probably... Anyway, that's one case. So this is another case where there was no investigation. Why are crimes against children not automatically investigated? And that's the question I ask the public as a public campaigner. If any adult is raped, or if there's any grievous bodily abuse of an adult, attacked or raped, violated in some way, of course you'd never hear the end of it. Shock horror in all the local papers, and everybody would be buzzing with it for days in the area where it happened. So why are crimes against children ignored? Because basically terrible things are done to children in our society, terrible traumatic things from the emotional abuse that they suffer when they're taken from their loving parents and put with local authority foster carers, which happens too much in our country at the moment. There's about something like 100,000 children in state care and about 10 or 11,000 taken annually. That's the rate of about 200 a week, isn't it? 200 plus a week. And are all those children suffering abuse at home? I don't think so. When they get into the situation of being taken from their homes and away from their birth families, that's when they do suffer abuse, because children are known to suffer abuse in foster care, not always, but sometimes, and in a number of care homes. Now, you come from Nottingham, don't you? So I told you before, there's a very big scandal about the care homes in the Nottingham area, because a lovely lady called Melanie Shaw blew the whistle last year on the terrible things that had happened to her growing up in her children's care home, and to almost all of the children who ever came into that care home. They were raped within sometimes only a week of arriving there. They arrived 6, 7, 8 years old, sort of almost broken in the moment they got there. And then there was torture going on, and terrorisation also, a horrible story. The reaction again of the authorities up there was not to investigate the allegations that she was a whistleblower. They should have gone into those care homes and really found out what the staff were doing to the children. but a case was brought against her for having tried to set fire to her neighbour's shed or potting shed or garage or whatever it was. And so she was under criminal investigation for arson, and she was remanded in Peterborough jail for several weeks before the case came to court. So that's another thing that happens. You know, this business of being taken into custody on remand is so unethical and so wrong and so unjust. Then the case came to trial and she was found guilty by a jury because a lot of the evidence obviously had been fabricated in that case. I mean, I'm just saying this is my opinion. The case was constructed against this poor young woman. She'd already served her time on remand, so you know she was bailed and that was it. But now I hear that she was taken to a mental hospital earlier this year, and the persecution of this poor, very brave young woman goes on and on. So of course people in the Nottingham area are up in arms about this. If you go on the internet, you find Google child sexual abuse demo, or CSA demo, 28th of February, Nottingham. You'll surely get footage of the demo. So, you know, when you go back there, get stuck in.
Okay, brilliant.
All right.